All right, and welcome back. It's Jennifer Britton. I want to welcome you to our second of our September calls. It's great to have you here with me. Today's topic, 6 activities for more engaging virtual events. And we seem to have just had a few tech issues a few minutes ago, but I think they have resolved themselves. I'm not sure if you experienced those as we got on. Really looking forward to our conversation today. And today's call is all about different activities, different virtual openers and closers, helping set people up for success even when tech goes down. So today was a good reminder that, you know what, sometimes tech works fabulously, other times it doesn't. Just really, we want to keep on rolling and do our best, not panic when things happen. So couple of reminders as we go to think about how do you create more engagement, how do you create more thinking, really want to be thinking about where our people are calling in from. What is their appetite? What are they comfortable with? And I think we have some key principles that are so critical in today's world of tech challenges and ongoing opportunities. First of all, just a reminder of how our brain works. For many, many, many decades now, we've known in cognitive psychology about something called the latency and recency effects, or the latency, what starts at the start, and recency. So people tend to remember the start and the end of things. And beyond that, things get sort of mushy. So several of you, I'm sure, are very keen on presentation skills. And within presentation skills, you'll always be thinking about how do you capture people's attention? What are the things we can do to connect people early with their WIFM, the what's in it for me? So not WIFFM, but WIIFM, what's in it for me? I'd like you to get thinking about what are some ideas practically and tactically for your work, because very much these are not, again, they're just small things that we can be doing right from the start to capture people's attention. So as we get going, a reminder of what we've covered already. This is sort of midstream within our call schedule. We had our launch call July 31st. We had an early August call, which was on 4 ways to move the needle on engagement in a virtual space. For those of you that you are interested in this topic of activities and exercises, that's a great recording if you haven't listened to, just to remind you of what are some of the core components to get people thinking about engagement. Our second August call was on different virtual platforms. And as you could see, even with our social media feeds, just such a rainbow, if we look at that, just a variety of things that we can be doing. And the last call that I hosted on September 11th was about similarities and differences. Just a reminder as we're getting going with these fall calls, we are now moving into a phase, more because of my own work, that we're going to be starting calls at different times of day. So next call on October 2nd will start at 11:05 a.m. Eastern and run for half an hour. And on our second October call, that will start at 11:30. So I'm pulling out my own toolbox today. Some of the things I do, some of the things I like to bring in to dialogue. I'd like you to really think about an upcoming session. Before we even get started, I want you to think about what's the environment you want to create. What is it that you really want to create and hold the space for? Connecting people early on, absolutely critical. And one of the quick questions to help you zoom into, like, what's the environment you want to create, might be the question, what are 3 adjectives which describe the essence of what you want to set the platform for? So is this going to be a fun, light, joyful call? Is this going to be a focused, deep, productive call? Is this something else? What is the environment you want to create with the people that you're working with? Again, our work can take us to so many different locations and opportunities, and we really do want to think about what is that context we want to create. So in starting calls, and I'm going to be using this next week with a virtual presentation that I have, I always like to give us sort of an anchoring in terms of where we're calling in from. So a quick activity can be to show a map and get people to actually zoom in and circle in to where you're calling from. So this is where you can get people to grab their annotation function, maybe it's their pen, their pencil, and get them to really just zoom in using a mark where are you calling in from? So today I'm sort of in this area. I'm actually a little bit higher up because we are having a heat wave in the Toronto area. So you might have noticed that I'm really not in my office again today, yet I've been working for several hours now, which is the beautiful thing, actually 5 hours to be exact, and stayed a lot cooler. I'll be jumping in the car later today and heading down. The nice thing about finding out where people are calling in from is it starts to give us a sense of who's who. If everyone is now marking on the map where they're calling in from, it does give us a chance to see, hey, we've got someone who's calling in and it might be dinner time, or maybe it's like, 12 hours later from where we are. So my invitation is find a map that you have copyright access to. Again, this is where if you're doing this work as a designer, really important that you invest in appropriate and copyright or intellectual property which you can be using. So personally, I have a monthly subscription into Adobe Stock, and we are able to use that all the time. Glad Andrea made it back. Hi, Andrea. Did you get back okay? I'm thinking you probably are back okay and hearing me. All right. Just starting to jump into some of our activities for the day. I know there have been some challenges because I've had some emails coming, but just we're starting into 6 activities you might want to be bringing in to your own work. So whether you are looking at starting a call, whether you're doing a conference call or webinar, this one activity, much more effective when you're using a streaming service. So the nice thing about Zoom, for example, or WebEx is you can do both the screen sharing and other. You can get people to engage on chat. Next week, I'm going to be using this, and as I was just about to say, I'm doing this next week. We have about several hundred people calling into that call. Most people will not have annotation control because one of the things we tend to do is actually stop annotation. It's a bit of a control nature, but if we have small groups, I always like to leave annotation open and then get people to mark it in. So Andrea, I won't put you on the spot in terms of where you're calling in from. You don't have to, but just a reminder that, again, this is one thing that helps to create that trust and connection. Something that's really a key theme, I think, that so many of us in learning, in leadership are so aware of. Unless you have that trust and connection, very hard to engage people in a call. So I'm just going to clean our board, move on to our second one of the day, and I'm going to just clear our board here. Next one, think about your environment that you want to create. Are you wanting to ask people about risk? Okay, so in a lot of calls, we are getting people to really zoom into what is the risk that you're willing to take. Are you ready to give us some direct feedback? Are we inviting you to converse? Are we inviting you to do breakouts? Just a quick show of just, where are you on this continuum? I was saying last week, and using this photo, we can actually get people to indicate, again, using your dots, your arrows, where are you on this? Are you at a 1 out of 10 in terms of taking risk? Are you at a 10 out of 10 in taking a risk? We want to make sure that we are really getting people to think about, where am I on this risk calendar? Another quick way to get people going in the start, and again, getting a thumbprint in terms of where people are at, is the notion of a different dialing of risk. So are you at a medium, minimum? Are you at a high? And what will that mean? This does not need to take any longer than the amount of time that you show the slide. So think about how you might be able to incorporate something like that, or the map, or a more extended conversation. So I would say in the world of work that I do, we spend at least a good 10 to 15 minutes at the start of a series of virtual calls if we're going to be together for a while. So Andrea, if you would like, you don't have to, but is there an interest for you? Are you currently doing webinars, calls? Tell us a little bit about what you're focusing on in your work.
Well, I am just starting. I'm in the organizational coaching program at UBC, and so this is my first foray into any of this. But I expect I'll be doing more of this.
Excellent. Well,
Very
that's good. And I'm imagining you've already found where you can annotate, because I think that's probably your line, which is a great thing. Very much, in all of this, there may be a working up and a pre-introduction to how does this technology work? What do you need to take a look at? And that even takes precedence, you're saying coaching, to setting expectations. Because one of the things we
Mhm.
know about virtual coaching today is you have to have trust and safety in order to get the conversation rolling. If we do not co-create, and when I say co-create, create together between coach and group or
Mhm.
individuals amongst each other, you're probably going to have a lot of silence on your calls. So what you actually see here are two different ways of working with ways of working, or sometimes we call it terms of engagement. You may, if you're working with a team, it may be team agreements or group agreements. And the notion is to get people really thinking about what's going to create a rich learning environment that you are creating with the team itself. So I'm going to highlight a couple of these. I'm just going to erase this line here. I would say a couple of things that you'll really want to zoom into, I'm going to spotlight these, is how do you start and end on time? So I was saying our calls now have gone to this interesting dynamic of like starting at 5 after the hour. It may take a few minutes before you get on the call, but how do you ensure people are ready to get off at the end? Another key one, I'm going to zoom right down to this second bottom one, which is confidentiality. How are you ensuring confidentiality? And one of the things that I do with these calls, just so you know, Andrea, is I do upload them so others can learn from them. So if there's anything you don't want to share, just hold back on that. But it's important that we do talk about what are the boundaries of our conversation. And that leads to more trust and respect. Certainly the fun thing about virtual work today is that you're opening things up to a very diverse perspective. At the start, I showed a map, and usually in my context of work, we may have people from multiple time zones. This morning, in a couple of my calls, everyone was calling in from different time zones. So even though it might be 10 a.m. Toronto time, for others, they're just rolling out of bed. And that can really influence the energy people are bringing to calls. If we have someone calling in from Asia, it's 10 o'clock at their night when it's 10 o'clock my morning. So this really also, having dialogue as to who are we and how do we all want to operate together can really also start to create that trust and safety. Now, what you see on the left, the group ground rules, were actually ground rules from a virtual group I worked with. They were captured by a graphic facilitator who joined us. And notice that that looks really different than what you see on the right. On the right, much more corporate-esque, right? It's more take ownership for your learning. Be present, provide feedback. And these are the things that we want to really notice. What is the language? In coaching, we have something known as direct communication. And a direct communication competency gets you thinking about what is the appropriate language for the work that you're doing. So I'm going to throw a question back to you, Andrea. What in your work, your upcoming work, what do you hope you'll be, how do you want to go about setting expectations with people?
Well, I think the group ground rules is a great starting point to give them some idea at the beginning and get a good picture of the whole process that really, I think, works well for a lot of groups I've worked with as well, and especially talking about confidentiality, like you talked about, that gives a lot of value and trust, and it starts building trust between group members and yourself.
And one of the things we know, again, and this is, I think, regaining resurgence today, there's a lot more research which is pointing to the notion of having psychological safety. And until you have that in a group or a team, people are unlikely to engage with each other, engage with you as a facilitator or coach. So it's important we take a few minutes, and you can really do it a couple of ways. One, you can harvest the ground rules. That's always my preference. Go round the room and hear from everyone and capture them. It may not look as nice as what you see on the left. Or we can propose ground rules, which is what I would typically do in a 1-hour webinar. If it's just a one-off, we don't want to take maybe 10 minutes of the call. But it is important to have some dialogue, because where tricky issues emerge is when we haven't set these. And that's something in the virtual realm you just want to try to mitigate against at all times. There's a third way we could also create expectations, which is showing a blank slide. If you were doing a WebEx or a Zoom like we are today, just have a blank slide and ask everyone to turn to their annotation and grab the text function and then type something in. So I might, as a group member, want to say something like, okay, I think for me, I want to have like resources and sharing ideas. That's what's going to make it a rich thing. So now I've put my name, Jen Britt, with resources and sharing of ideas. And this is another thing that, you know, as you move people into the virtual realm, if they're not comfortable with it or confident with it, we need to help them really start to look at what are the areas, what are the arenas that are available to us. And a lot of that is annotation, which is why I think Zoom, not to be a spokeswoman for Zoom, but it really does a great job. So when you think of your work, Andrea, are you going to be using a platform like Zoom? Tell me a little bit about what your platform choice is.
I'm not sure I expect I probably will. I don't usually do online work. I'm really interested in creativity and engaging people with creative elements and really sort of hands-on work. But because of the nature of the world today, I expect that I will have to find a way to marry the two and kind of get them working together.
And, you know, I think, again, having a blank screen, having a space for like a Zoom gives you an opportunity to just, you know, bring more of the creative element. There's a real difference if you see handwriting on the screen versus text. So I think, you know, one of the things I've been talking about in other calls this summer and early fall is how do you create a certain environment? In fact, before you joined us, the question was, what is the environment, or what's the essence you want to create within the call? What you do is going to really shape that. Another fun thing, I wanted to pop this in the middle, is like just remembering that there are things that we could be doing using polls. So a lot of virtual platforms like WebEx actually have built-in poll functionality. I've always found that a little clunky, and I tend to avoid polls only because there's so much like I'm trying to focus on the group, but then I got to bring up this poll. So I've been curious in the last few months to do a bit of research into like what other options are out there. And there are two options that I came across that looked pretty easy to interface with, and you use your phones. One is Slido, SLI.do. The other one is polleverywhere.com. And both of these are probably suitable for smaller groups, but you could put a question out, and if you have, you know, several dozen of people, this is where you're going to want to bring in a really, you know, a unique question. Again, creativity may not be the most appropriate one or not. I think really interactivity is key for creativity, getting some new ideas to percolate and spark. So think about how you can do that, as well as how you could be using icons. I was talking in our last call about the importance of visual anchors. So if you didn't get a chance to listen to that call, it's the September 11th Effective Virtual Conversations community call on visual anchors. And I was sharing a little bit about actually these slides. So I was working with a team a few months ago. They were all going to be in the same room, and I was virtually calling in. Again, what we would call a blended situation in today's world. And it was a team, like most teams today, that were really struggling with feedback. As a coach, I could have come in and said, what does feedback mean to you, and what would it look like optimally? But I wanted to do something a little different because I knew that we were working at a disadvantage perhaps of technology not working. We might have been looking at the fact that I was remote and some of the team members were remote, but it was pretty strong probability that we could at least get this photo in front of people. So for the team of 15, a half-hour coaching conversation revolved around the team members picking which feedback icon represented how they wanted to receive feedback and which one they wanted to use to give feedback. And the team spent the better part of the half hour sharing with each other what was important for feedback with them and how did they feel comfortable giving it to others. Huge shift. And again, I didn't even know how huge a shift until last week when I got an email from the team leader saying, you have no idea how impactful that conversation was around feedback. Supposedly, it shifted the team in terms of their comfort level and confidence level in giving feedback to each other. So I think that's, it can be as simple as find a graphic, find something that is going to invite people to input, as well as be a little bit creative and out of the box, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of graphics that we can be using today. So as we go to sort of wrap up this call, we've only got a few more minutes left, but I want to leave you with a couple more very quick activities that you could be using in wrap up. And as I said, we tend to remember the start and the end of things. As you go to wrap up today, think of what you're going to remember from today's call, whether it was tech challenges, graphics, icons, or maybe one of these 6 activities. One of the ones I like to include in most of my calls is some sort of closure roadmap. What are your next steps? And sometimes we have enough time to go around the room and hear about what people's next steps are. That's optimum, because there is something very powerful in being able to articulate or share one of your next steps. We do, in addition to living in an era of death by conference call, which is what I write about in Effective Virtual Conversations, we also are in an era of just data overwhelm and like overwhelm of to-dos. So at minimum, like I may just give this graphic on a handout, on something that people can write, and you'll notice there's only 4 options. They can only specify 4 things. You might even want to just say, what's the next step? Leave it at that. But give them a graphic, or get people to draw a graphic, again, to orient themselves. For many years, well, not years, for many decades, really since the early 1990s, I've been a proponent of using Post-it notes. Post-it notes give everyone a voice. They're colorful. They really level the playing field. And with closure, it's another way to get us really getting people to share what's the one thing you're taking out of our call. In addition to the what's the one thing you're going to do, what's the one thing you're going to take away from today's call is another very powerful, quick activity. If your group size is small enough, you can hear verbally from everyone. If your group size is too large, just get people to go to chat. Again, you might think, oh, we don't have time, but it is a useful tool in terms of hearing what is it that people are really getting out of your work together. And sometimes as a facilitator, that can be in direct contrast to what you might think they are actually getting influenced by. Where I want to leave us in this call, and Andrea, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm going to ask everyone who's looking at this, I'd like you to think about where your vision is. So I do a lot of work with visual cards. In fact, just over the weekend, a new article that I'd written for the coaching tools company has come out, and it goes into different activities for using visual cards. I'd like you to think about where you want to go with your world of work and what's next, and select one of these photos to really become a bit of a visual metaphor to think about what's next for you. So just take 30 seconds right now, Andrea, zoom into one of those photos, make a quick note as to what it is for yourself. I won't ask you to reply, but what is the one photo that represents your vision for what's next? What we know is that metaphors, including visual metaphors, become such a powerful ally in our work. There's something that can pull us through the ups and the downs of business development, etc. So if you have access to a visual card deck, it's a great thing to do. You can also design your own deck. These photos come from one of my decks that I've designed called Conversation Sparker. And why I was called to design that deck was because I found I was doing so much travel and also webinars that I wanted to have access. I wanted to make sure that the copyright access was something that I owned and I was not getting into trouble with every time. So as we go to close out here, Andrea, is there one of these photos that's calling to you today?
I think probably the I'm pointing at it. You can't see me. The flower and the plants, all the greenery there in the middle. Since I'm just sort of at the beginning right now of my journey and growing, and going to be learning quite a bit. I think these next year that probably fits for me right now.
Fantastic. Well,
Mhm.
regardless of what it is, think about how you can keep carrying that forward, whether you are harvesting the bounty, whether you're planting the seed, whether you're looking at what's at the end of the other rainbow. This is just a really quick, fun
Mhm.
activity. And again, it doesn't take a lot of time. None of these take a lot of time, which is something that's also really important in the virtual realm. So that just about brings us to the end of today's call. And these are really intended to be very short conversations. My question I want to leave everyone with today is like, what's going to make your next virtual conversation more engaging? This is a word art that I created actually from content from some blog posts that are just coming up. So if you haven't found our blogs, a reminder that there is the Virtual Conversation Sparker blog at effectivevirtualconversations.com. I blog there about once a week, but something that you'll definitely want to keep a look at is the Teams 365 blog. For the next 10 weeks, on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, I'm going to be sharing 20 different activities for working with remote and virtual teams. And even if you're not working with remote and virtual teams, if you zoom into any of these topic here's, whether it's time or agreements or goals or creating something, these are going to be some of the many different topic areas that I'm going to be sharing actual instructions on activities to. And again, that is found at potentialsrealized.com/teams 365 blog. Couple of programs coming up in the next few weeks. I've got Virtual Facilitation Essentials launching on October 2nd, which is next week. And that's like 5 weeks of tips, tools, and ideas for getting virtual programming moving on. And I also will continue to host the Learning Lab and Design Studio this fall on Friday mornings. And we meet twice a month. Couple more resources because I always seem to be like rushing off the call, as is typical. For coaches, the next group coaching essentials program starts October the 16th, and that's going to be a Monday group starting 2 weeks today and is approved for 8.75 CCEs with the ICF. Our next calls are also happening in the next few weeks. Next Monday, starting at 11:05, and hopefully we won't have the same tech challenges, but next call I'm going to be talking about breakouts at Sizzle, because breakouts are one of the tools that we can really use to make more effective and more engaging calls. I hope you'll join me for that starting at 11:05. And then 3 weeks down the road, we have a call termed on marketing your virtual events. Stay tuned for the start time. It may actually start at 11:35, not 11:05. I'll be announcing that at our Facebook page, Effective Group Coaching. So as we go for the week, I hope you'll check out this week's Effective Virtual Conversation tip. It's actually already posted at the Teams 365 blog. You can check out, we're at tip 11 this week. And with that, I want to ask you, Andrea, what's one thing you're going to do as a result of today's call?
Well, I love the idea of using metaphors, and actually, yeah, have done that in the past quite a bit. But the new thing that I'm going to be thinking about is the use of icons as metaphor and how that could be incorporated. My husband's a graphic designer, so I might talk to him about that.
Yeah, wow. Well, that's an excellent resource you have very close by, because I think icons in today's world, there's something that we're always looking for cross-culturally and across languages. They're also so transportable. So I want to thank you for joining me this morning for this quick call.
Well, thank
And
you.
hope that you'll join me back for some of the future calls, or at least reconnect in at the Effective Virtual Conversation site.
Yes, no, I appreciated this. Thank you.
All right. Well, have a great day, and thanks for
You
everyone else who's
too.
joined us. See you back here next week, October 2nd at 11:05 a.m. Eastern. Take care, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.